international bubble burst and the economic downturn happened. At that time, China was somewhat insulated. The RMB wasn't traded widely at that point. Now it is. So China needs to move forward in a very controlled fashion as it focuses on its efforts to become an economic powerhouse globally, certainly something that it has been working toward. Also, pollution control. Just coming out here in the morning, if you look at the weather app, it'll tell you unhealthy air. Now, China has made significant strides, especially from last year to this year. To what degree? That is the winds blowing out of Siberia and moving the pollution out of the atmosphere here, or the efforts to reduce coal burning and get more battery-operated cars on the streets. These are all very important issues, and they're things that are going to be discussed. I just want to pan over just a very small hair just to show you how hectic this is as the first group of delegates begins to address the media. So that's, you see what people are focusing on. This is tremendously popular at this hour. We talked about opening up. People certainly want to hear from the delegates. They want to know what they're going to be talking about. They want to have this kind of face-to-face time so they can move forward and talk about the issues that will be discussed moving forward in the NPC.
All right. Thank you very much, John Calebs. As just you have explained, some of the delegates are already speaking to the press, among them Tony Ma.
In 40 years' time, President Xi Jinping plans to alleviate poverty for about 700 million people, and since the 18th Congress, our economic growth has been greatly improved. In particular, in the field of internet and technology, development has been impressive. We could see that among the top 10 internet companies, Chinese companies take about 4 of them. And if we look at the social development, for example, we have some new word called the new 4 great inventions in China, including high-speed railway, online shopping, mobile payment, and sharing bikes. Here, I would love to inform you of something new. In 2018's Spring Festival, WeChat has an active users at about 1 billion across the globe. That is very impressive achievement, and in the future, I believe whenever we talk about reform and opening up, we would think about Shenzhen, the city in the frontier of reform and opening up. In 1984, I went to Shenzhen by myself, and I stayed there for 3 decades. I could say that in Shenzhen, I have been a witness of Shenzhen's development, and I'm also a beneficiary of its development. 20 years ago, Tencent grew from a company of 4 employees to now about 40,000 employees, and the market value exceeded $5 trillion. And Shenzhen has also grown from a small fishery village to a metropolis. And last year, its GDP exceeded about 2.2 trillion, almost in parallel with Hong Kong. That's the achievement of reform and opening up. In the future, I hope we could utilize technological innovation to push forward reform and opening up further. And I hope from where I came from, this place could play a pivotal role in Belt and Road Initiative. You mentioned about the digitalization process. In the past years, for example, in the 2015 proposal to the NPC, we have mentioned the word about digital economy, and this year in our proposal, we mentioned about digital China. For these 2 keywords, they mean Internet Plus shall be a tool, and the digital economy is the final result. Only when we grow into a digital powerhouse can we be a powerful country.
To improve the efficiency of government work is an issue of public concern, and the Hangzhou city government is trying to do some reforms in this regard. My question goes to Ms. Xu. Mr. Xu, can you brief us on the situation? We are building a service center government aiming at addressing issues of public concerns. In last year, the Zhejiang provincial government, according to Mr. Xi Jinping's thoughts of people-centered administration, we conducted a provincial reform and to make our administrative work more people-oriented and to streamline the processes for people and also to make the process more smooth, more organic, and more integrated. With an effort of more than 1 year, we have achieved remarkable results. For example, last year, more than 110,000 new enterprises have been established, and they have all benefited from this new procedure. Our efficiency of government is increased by 30%, and if you're doing property registration, you can finish the whole process within 60 minutes. And we have streamlined the processes of more than 290 items, and you can finish this whole processes within with your own ID card. Last year in Hangzhou City, more than 480 city officials come to the front line to experience and seeking problems as well as solutions, so as to optimize our concept, the theories of providing better services to the people. This year marks the 40th anniversary of the Foreman opening up the implementation. In the governmental reform, we also set up the goal to build Hangzhou into a mobile administration city, and we also use this reform as a lever to trigger reform in other parts of the city, and we will continue to be a pioneer of this regard.
Thank you. I come from CCTV. And my question is to Deputy Wang Yaping. Morning. Many people really favored your show in many of those interviews, and even in the space, in particular when you fly into the space, many students really favor that scene because in the physics class, the students could learn a lot from such an experience. So my question is, such a classroom with the space exploration exhibition to the students would be a very important tool, but now we have very rare opportunities for such a case. What can we do? The 2013 Space Classroom allowed me to communicate with 60 million students in primary and secondary schools for about 40 minutes, and still I think that is greatly my honor, and to serve the entire society is my dream. And after that, I've received a lot of letters from the students. Many of them mentioned in the end that I want to be a spaceman, to explore the universe and to be useful to our nation. Whenever I read about those words, I felt so relieved, and I hope that I could do more to help those kids realize their dreams. I visited about dozens of schools with face-to-face communication with the kids, and I could have the first impression that these kids really desire the exploration of the universe. I've never thought that such a space classroom could have such an important impact on those kids, could really inspire them with their dreams. And this allows me to realize the point of my work, and I feel feel really honored to live in such a great area. And for the kids to live in such an area, I think that's a great thing. But exploration of the space is an endless endeavor. It requires generations to make efforts. I hope I could do my best to utilize my experience in the space classroom to do more contribution to our nation. I hope I could always be such a model for our kids. Thank you. Now, the second group of deputies.
Well, that's NPC delegates answering questions from the press. We've just heard from Tony Ma, an entrepreneur, the mayor of Hangzhou, a government official, and also an astronaut. They're all NPC deputies, and they share their views on what they've been doing and what they hope the country can go ahead. Now let's turn back to our studio discussions. Zhang Weiwei, director of the China Institute of Fudan University, and Lawrence Brahma, founding director of Himalayan Consensus Institute. Let me start with you, Professor Zhang. This year's NPC opening will have many agendas on its table, but probably topping the list is the amendment of the Constitution. It covers many items. Coming on top is probably adding the Xi Jinping thoughts into China's Constitution. Why do you think there's a necessity to amend the Constitution, and how?
Yeah, actually, the Chinese Constitution, this one is from the 1982, has been going through some revisions already 4 times. That's the 5th time. And I think it's what we call keeping with the changing times. And China is a fast-changing country, a fast-changing society. Over the past 5 years, there are already so many events happening. For instance, there is a restructuring of the Chinese economy. It's more service-oriented, more oriented towards environmental protection, ecological civilization. This idea, ecological civilization, now is put into Constitution. It's part of the Xi Jinping's thought. So the list goes on. So I think it's necessary to reflect the experience we gained, the ideas we have developed during the past 5 years and longer, and put them into the Constitution to guide the next stage of China's development.
There are many elements, Lawrence, that will be included, including Xi Jinping thoughts, including government overhaul, the term limits change, ecological culture. What strings a bell in your hearts?
Well, first of all, this is a new era. President Xi has said this repeatedly, and this is core to the Xi thinking, is it is a new era. China is now in a transition away from being the factory of the world to being the world's global investor. There's a generational change, and so concepts such as ecological civilization, which is a driving force for a green China, for a complete transformation of the energy system toward renewables, is a core factor. The whole idea of a shared destiny of mankind really, contrasts very sharply with the views of Donald Trump, who's saying, America first. Is really saying, look, as a nation in a complex, multilateral, diversified world, everything's interconnected. Our economics are interconnected. And so the prosperity of one country and another are also linked. And so this is a whole new era of thinking, and therefore, by amending the Constitution, it's also demonstrating that China is continually reinventing itself.
And this time around, there will be a very important, eye-catching item. That is the establishment of what we call National Supervision Commission. We understand that one of the hallmark events of President Xi in his first 5 years is probably anti-corruption campaign. So this seems to be a follow-up in institutionalization of anti-graft campaign.
Indeed, if you look at the fighting corruption, that's in really full display, in vigorous process. But over the past 5 years, mainly it's focused on the fighting corruption within the party, within the CPC. So we have the Central Commission for Disciplinary Inspection, the party institution against corruption. Now we have State Supervision Commission, which is more or less for the whole public services, including the university professors of public universities, doctors of public hospitals. All this will be covered, beyond the party, entering into the whole domain of public services. So it's one of the independent, fighting corruption institution. So this is very
so
important.
The watch will be even wider?
Much wider.
And what is the relation between the National Supervision Committee and the Central Disciplinary Committee?
In terms of functions, the Central Disciplinary Inspection Commission is more or less responsible for the party and party officials, and the State Supervision Commission is for the rest of the public servants. So that's the functional division. Sometimes they are really interconnected. Actually, they also work in the same offices. Mm-hmm. So this is interesting. And now, from what I've read, the whole institutional framework has been established from the county level to municipality level to the level of the central government. So this is the case.
So it seems Mr. Xi and his team want to keep a clean and honest public service throughout.
This is about building institutions. That is what this whole Congress is about right now. And, you know, when China opened up and began reforms, like many countries going from a communal to a socialist to a market economy, officials used the opportunity because they didn't have anything. They were underpaid to get rich through graft and corruption. For years, we couldn't even talk about that. That was a topic that was untouchable. She opened the door on that. He's spent now years attacking corruption within the party. But it's not just about attacking corruption. You have to build government institutions which have systems, which have checks and balances. And that's what's happening at this National People's Congress right now. That's what's going to be happening in the days ahead, is really the reorganization of government into a structural system that itself is sustainable by institutions, not by individuals.
Another big topic is, of course, the change of term limits of the head of state, President of the People's Republic and Vice President. First of all, where does the legitimacy and necessity come from?
If you look at the Chinese political structure, you have three most important positions. The position of the General Secretary of the CPC, the position of the Chairman of the Central Military Commission, and the position of the Presidency. From the 1990s, from early of 1990s, the Jiang Zemin era, these three positions are always held by one individual, the top leader, by Jiang Zemin, by Hu Jintao, and by Xi Jinping. Then you look at the terms of reference in the constitution of the party and the constitution of the state, slightly different. Because now, in the constitution of the party charter, we don't have this no maximum 2 terms. In other words, for the first 2 positions, you have no this reference. Now we make a revision. For the presidency, there are also no this kind of clause. That is,
but
no
from the
maximum
track
2 terms.
record, both Mr. Jiang and Mr. Hu served 2 terms. Does this mean this is no longer the case?
The point is, in the first place, this revision is to ensure that the reference for the 3 positions will be the same. Actually, it's a widely practiced method worldwide. If you look at Germany or France, Angela Merkel is entering her 4th terms. And yet it's important to know that within the party constitution, there are clear provisions on age limit, on retirement, for age reasons, for health reasons. So this is not at all a case of so-called lifelong tenure. No, this is already abolished.
And Lawrence?
The Western media has focused on this one topic more than any other. And we have to understand that when, that's looking at the narrow side, not looking at the totality of the issue. When Deng Xiaoping initiated the idea of terms, it was to really fight against cults of personality, as had happened during the Mao era. But that's a different era. If you actually read Xi Jinping's speeches and listen to what he's saying, everything is about building institutions. It's not about personalities. It's about institutions that will survive people. And I think that's the core message of this. But right now, China is in one of the most complex transitions since it opened up, 40 years ago. And this transition involves China going outbound with investment. It involves restructuring many of the things that had been done and built up in haste, in the striving to get ahead, but having to redo, for instance, environment, healthcare, pension, also the role of civil servants, their salary, their entire structure of government. All of these things are happening, plus there's a huge generational shift taking place right now in thinking. So actually, in many ways, people are looking to stability, consistency of policy, and they're not looking to having political volatility at this time because the transition is so complex and so deep.
So we need to keep this political system more stable in order to give it some flexibility.
We look at the example of Western countries right now. Decisions that are made politically are made for ballots, for elections, and for polling. And over the past 20 years, we've seen some pretty bad decisions out there. So right now, at this very sensitive time, and we cannot underestimate the sensitivity of the transition with China's economy. You know, it's like somebody goes to the fitness room and builds up a lot of big muscles, but all the internal organs now need to be strengthened through prana, through yoga, through all those detailed types of things, because actually this is what's happening. It's working on the core, not just the outside, and that transition will require stability and consistency for at least another decade.
All right, thank you so much. And you've been watching a special coverage on the opening of the NPC session. We'll be back in a short while. The biggest annual political gathering in the world's most populous nation. Some topics to deliberate and discuss. A new state leadership lined up. A draft revision to the Constitution. From March the 3rd, CGTN takes you right to the heart of Beijing for a behind-the-scenes look at how 5,000 political representatives and advisors get things done. And how their decisions can have a ripple effect across the world. Join us on CGTN for an inside look into the Two Sessions 2018. Roughly 30 minutes to go until the opening of this year's NPC opening session. And now let's go to our correspondent Tian Wei, who is now inside the Great Hall of the People. Good morning, Tian Wei.
Morning.
About the government work report, tell us how this document is created. What is the process?
Yeah. Zhou Yue, you can see I'm standing on the second floor of the Great Hall of the People. Looking down behind me, the stage is set up. At the moment, we're 30 minutes from the opening of the first session of the 13th NPC, the National People's Congress. NPC deputies as well as CPPCC members, while we are speaking, are coming into the Great Hall of the People. Two tasks facing them this morning. One is to listen to the report delivered by the Chinese Premier, the annual government work report. The other is to hear suggestions on the issues related to the constitutional amendment. About the government report, it is always one of the most important items every year for the National People's Congress. In fact, over the past few months, a group of a dozen people from the State Council has been drawn up. Their task is to write about this government report and research about it. They solicit information coming from various 31 provinces, municipalities, as well as autonomous regions from China, and all walks of life, including from the military. After getting this information, they are going to put them into different versions and drafts. As far as I understand, coming from the State Council sources, this year it has already taken more than 100 drafts. Meanwhile, during this process, Chinese Premier Li Keqiang is also going to participate on his own in the drafting of the government work report. And in a few minutes, 20 minutes from now, the Chinese Premier is going to deliver that annual government work report. This is also coming in, the work report, with the suggestions and opinions coming from the public. They're soliciting it coming from the State Council website. The principle, they say, for the government work report is to be frank, genuine, down to earth, and also present the real reality check for China and certainly bring the plan for the next year. Zhou Yue.
As you have mentioned about the style of the government work report, but about the substance, what is the most important aspects of this year's government work report?
As you can see, this is already a wrap-up of the 5-year term for the earlier administration. So this is going to be a conclusion time about what the performance has been over the past 5 years, whether it's economy, social life, or whether the works have been really meeting the needs of the increasing demand coming from the public, the common people. That is one of the goals as set by the 19th Party Congress late last year. And certainly there's also going to be the plan for the future, namely to look at the growth target for this year, to look at also how the government is going to streamline the different kinds of organizations and the ministries. And certainly one of the things people are going to look at is what are the new growth points? How is Chinese economy going to transform itself? On that point, many are looking at certainly the new high-tech area. As you may know, Internet Plus and innovation has been the key words over the past 5 years. So how it has been transforming the Chinese economy with new business models, and how shared economy, for example, has been coming into being, and it's going to bring new momentum and growth rate as well as new growth trends to the Chinese economy. That is one of the things many here are looking at. Over the past 2 days, Zhou Yue, NPC deputies and CPPCC members have been focused many of their attention on this issue. I'm sure a lot to expect, and not only this, but also what's going to happen for the year to come. Zhou Yue, back to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Tian Wei, for your reporting from inside the Great Hall of the People. Well, at yesterday's media briefing, the NPC spokesperson spoke on a lot of topics. But one major thing is the basic law on promoting and protecting investment, foreign investment, and how China will create a transparent and stable environment for investors.
为了适应构建开放型经济新体制的要求，全国人大常委会计划将原来
To build new institutions supporting an open economy, the Standing Committee is going to combine the previous 3 foreign investment laws and work on a new basic law on promoting and protecting foreign investment. There are important considerations. First, to pursue open development, mutually beneficial strategy, and high-standard trade and investment liberalization and facilitation. Second, to give equal attention to both outbound and inbound investment, and to substantially ease market access. Third, to create transparent, stable, and predictable environment for foreign investors, protect their legitimate rights and interests. Fourth, to provide national treatment for foreign investors and foster a market environment with a level playing field.
Well, China's message is loud and clear. China's going to open up. That is going to be wider and further. But that's not the messages from other parts of the world. For example, the U.S. has been trying to turning inside. And that's why there are more and more disputes probably in the areas of trade. The Trump administration is seriously considering levying more tariffs on foreign imports. And that's why Liu He, the chief economic advisor to President Xi, went to the U.S. to talk to the counterparts. First of all, what do you make of this kind of a change of trade relations between China and the U.S.?
Well, I think it's already a huge amount of business going on between two countries. I checked, it's about $580 billion a year bilateral trade between China and the United States. If there is a trade war as advocated by Donald Trump, it will be damaging to both countries. Personally, I don't think the United States really can win this kind of war. It's really hurting U.S. interests as well. You look at if there is a high tariff on Chinese exports, then it will first of all hurt those Rust Belt consumers.
But it can be interpreted as a political win. Maybe it's not an economic win.
That's a huge difference. When Xi Jinping defined the Chinese economy, he said people-oriented economy. But from my interpretation of the Trump's policy, it's voters-oriented economy. That's divisive.
But that's what matters in American politics.
That's the problem. That's the problem with the American political system. If you care about your only, for instance, this tariff on steel and aluminium, from my reading, it takes care of about less than 150,000 workers in the traditional sector. It will hurt far more, 10 times more workers. Yet, this 150,000 workers are really Donald Trump care about, because that's those who will vote for him. So the political system of the U.S. is in such a way that they only need to care about these people and they can win the election. That will hurt the fundamental interests of the American people.
And Lawrence, do you think President Trump will drive home that message to frame this as a political win because we have a trade war with China?
I think Donald Trump frames everything, regardless of what it is, as his political win. I think this is just his style and his own propaganda. Really, what we're looking at with the U.S.-China trade relationship is one of the need for symbiosis, for greater cooperation, which is really not happening. It's probably, the relationship has probably been one of its worst states. Now, there's a lot of criticism of China not being an open enough market, and we have to look at the transition of the foreign investment policies over these years. It started off with China in the 1980s and 90s wanting to bring foreign investment in, but then it found, of course, that there's severe competition and a lot of industries were protected. Now the whole situation is different. China is not the focus of inbound investment. China is the largest outbound investor in the world. And with the Belt and Road Initiative underway and its neighboring countries in South Central Asia, Southeast Asia, and of course in Africa and Russia, Eastern Europe, China is going to be outbound investment. It's also going to need to be bringing investments in. It has to have fair relations with all of these trading countries that are going to be part of the Belt and Road Initiative, which the United States is not part of. And really what we're looking at now is new technologies as well. Both China exporting ecological technologies, but bringing in and redeveloping lots of new technologies. Partner countries in South Asia are very key. So I say the Silk Road is back, but this time it's a cyber Silk Road.
All right. Now, you've been watching our special coverage on China's political season. The Chinese premier will deliver a work report in about 20 minutes' time, and the economic outlook will be unfolded for the next 5 years. And the Zhang Yesui, the spokesperson of the NPC National Legislature, earlier said the U.S. and China share more mutual benefits than differences, and cooperation is the only option for both. But the development of Sino-U.S. ties is very important. It probably serves the fundamental interests of both peoples and countries.